This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today I'm speaking with Donnie Wetzel Jr., Tribal Liaison for the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. Donnie is also the founder of Identity, Inc., which houses the Montana Indian Athletic Hall of Fame.
If you are disciplined, if you show up for practice at 6 a.m., if you're out there running on your own, you can do that in a job.
Donnie and his colleagues are working to promote the virtues of warrior culture through sport. Donnie, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I grew up all over the state of Montana, but I was born and raised in Browning, Montana, and my father was, he was a former Grizzly. He was the first native to make it in Division I in the state, and he moved up to Browning. He had a lot of our elders seek him out to come bring some of that mentality to Browning and coach. So I was born up there. My mother was a drill team instructor and a teacher.
Yeah.
And so they just ended up in Browning and back on the reservation there. He coached and was also a teacher and grew up in sports pretty heavily, in the gym or out on the cross-country course or whatever. We were in the bus. We were everywhere. So I lived there till I was about 8 and then moved down here. My mother's family's Missoula and Bitterroot Valley, 7th gen,
Mm-hmm.
My father is 1,000 gen Montanan.
Yeah.
He predates Montana. So, but we moved here and moved to Billings. We moved to Haskell, Indian University. My dad coached basketball there.
Right.
And then moved back to Helena. Then moved to the Bitterroot Valley at Corvallis. And I went to 3 high schools. I started high school in Corvallis and then moved to Boulder, then up to Harlem at Fort Belknap Reservation. That's where I graduated. And then I went and played college basketball at Eastern, and it switched to MSU Billings while I was there. My grandfather was a chairman of the Blackfeet Nation, and he was a president of the National Congress of American Indians. And he was one of the first Plains tribal leaders to do that. And so I got into the Montana-Wyoming Tribal Leaders Council right out of college. And that's kind of the unified voice of the tribes of Montana. So I had a lot of mentorship there from pretty solid leaders. And that's kind of where my path really stuck, was back in Indian country. Then came to Helena. Denise Juneau was a superintendent. She's from Browning.
Right.
And she pulled me in because I was doing suicide prevention work. And I wanted to get ahead of that. And education is what my parents did. And so moved over to Helena and started to work in a program called Schools of Promise and worked in our tribal communities and schools and tried to give them skills to deal with the hardships. And then that kind of led to culture, know who you are. And that's kind of led to Identity, Inc. I mean, it was all tied into that. And my father and I created the Indian Athletic Hall of Fame. And then recently, the last couple of years, I was at OPI, and it was in Indian education is where I work. So then I got stolen to Department of Labor and Industry, and now I'm the tribal liaison there. That's the first time they ever had that, and that's been a blast.
Let's just talk a little bit about basketball. How it was in your family, but what about it spoke to you? How'd you find your place in basketball?
Man, I think it's so natural, when you grow up around it, there's such a beauty to basketball.
Yeah.
There's such a power to it. And I didn't know when I was a kid, but I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of understood where it sits with me. Just all sports, but basketball has this way about it. It's, you can do it yourself, but when you have more around you with the same discipline and mentality, you can do a lot more. And my father, he he had us in every sport. I was in every sport, you know, and I loved every sport, but basketball was the one. You know, you can't just walk on a court. You really have to focus. You really have to work on your left, your right, your jumping, your shooting. There's always room for improvement. So in our Blackfeet teachings, a lot of people will throw around the term self-actualized. And that was something that comes from our deep traditional philosophies. To become self-actualized is in our work to become the best human that we can. You work on these different components. So like when I would explain that to youth, I'd say basketball. You got to work on all of it. You know, you got to work on all of these different skill sets and then continue to work it. You're never going to hit the top ultimate. But if I'm doing that, you're doing that, your buddy over there is doing that, you get 5 of us, and we're self-actualized as a basketball player, then it's go time, you know, and then you're connected. And a lot of those old elders will talk about our connectiveness, like in hunting or in warrior type situations, chasing buffalo. There's like a flow to it that, you know, if your livelihood is out there, you got people, buddies handling something on the left and on the right, and you're working in motion to get something. You see that in basketball.
Yeah, it seems like basketball has this unique blending of the individual and the team that other sports maybe don't quite have in the same way. I mean, an individual can take over a basketball game for a period of time, but that person can't do it completely alone.
No.
So yeah, talk about that tension and how you interpret the game and how you bring the lessons of the game to the folks you work with, that tension between individual and community.
I don't like bring it when I'm working in Indian country, it's there. And so I was always kind of an anomaly in education, you know, and I would just really speak on the fact you got to bring it to basketball. You got to bring it to basketball. And everyone's like, well, no, I mean, not everybody plays. I said, well, it's part of the community. It's part of our tradition. And so like, I think when I'm working in our tribal nations, I try to start in the world of basketball and then blend in what we're trying to do.
Okay.
You know, because I'd get into some they weren't heated discussions, but you got to understand I was coming out of, like, when I was going back into school systems, I was coming out of suicide, you know, and I was in that world for about 6 years. And that's pretty heavy, you know, and so I didn't want to sit around and discuss stuff a lot when people are trying to prove a theory because our kids were dying, you know, I'm like... So like when I was doing certain things, for instance, we push so much on our tribal youth. This is what success looks like. This is where you got to go. You got to go do this. You got to go to college. You got to do this and that, this and that. And I grew up in Indian country and out of Indian country. So I was like, I understood the differences. And I'm like, you're asking youth to try something that they've never seen. They don't have like a aunt that may have started a business right here, you know, Lame Deer, Montana.
Right. So like try something like go to school or go to university or these sort of constructs that don't necessarily mean anything to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying that you're saying that's success.
Right.
And then what happens is they go get their degree and then there's nothing at home for them to work around that degree. So they separate from their families, and our families are huge. So I would say, where do our kids see success? And I bet I get 10 in here, and I bet 8 will say basketball. And they could go to any aunt, uncle, dad, mom, and say, how did you get to that tournament? What did you work on? And they're going to hear it. So like, I really use that is because people really connect to that. So I've done that in almost everything I've ever did. And so moving into this, I think what I had is a blessing of my father and my mom, but my dad was the kind that, you know, use sports, get your education, and then carry on. You don't live in that world, you know, unless you are able to go pro. You can use the gifts and the discipline and the focus and the competitive nature, turn it into anything else you want in the world. And so like that's kind of where I'm shifting a lot of this. If you are disciplined, if you show up for practice at 6 a.m., if you're out there running on your own, you can do that in a job.
Sure.
You can do that as a mom, as a dad.
How do you make that move, right? Because sport ends for folks. And I know, from my experience and folks around me, like that can be a harsh reality. And it can be disillusioning, right? You have this structure for organizing your life and directing activity, and then when it's gone, people can fall in a way. So how do you kind of help prepare people for that moment in their lives whenever it comes?
I think it's conversations. I think you have to. I look at my life. I knew of things. I knew the statistics of becoming a professional athlete, just because I kind of dug into it. I remember when I'm aging myself, UNLV and Duke played.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that game.
And Duke beat them. And then I watched like the draft, and half of UNLV didn't even get recruited or drafted. And I'm like, what am I going to do up here in Harlem, Montana? Yeah, I was averaging, I was doing well, but there was a reality that I myself understood, but it's very tough. You have to have a long conversation, and you can start to plant these seeds of, hey, this will take you a certain way, but it's only a vehicle that'll take you further in life, the skills and the discipline and stuff. So I think it's conversations, and I've had a lot of kids, man, because I had it said to me. I told youth that are tearing it up on the court, and I said, you're 5'8".
Yeah.
You're not gonna,
right.
Well, I'm gonna make pro. I'll prove everyone wrong. I'm like, how many Indians are playing in pro? And so they despise me. But, I think later on in life they've come up and said, you were right. I hated you when you said that to me, but I at least dropped a seed that said, use what you're learning here and keep that discipline in something else. I'm just being honest with you.
That seems like the magical move to make. I was watching the trailer for the film you're working on, Undefeated, which is a beautiful piece of work. I'm excited to see that. But there's a moment in there where Billy Mills is talking about you got to have a dream. And that dream can be audacious. It should be audacious. And it can organize your life, and it can help you overcome so much. How do you keep that dream alive and use it as a positive framework for organizing your life?
So I'm a living example of this, because yes, I had guidance more, but I dealt with it my own self, where I grew up and it was my safe place, was in sports or doing things. I was always good in school, but wherever I went, and I moved a lot, and I was shy, and I would go, trying to meet people or be the new kid in walking the classrooms. If just give me a ball, or get me on the track, and then people will know me.
Sure.
So what I went through in my own personal journey, my identity was an athlete. And plus, I was Donnie Jr. Mm-hmm. My dad's identity was an athlete. Yeah. Even though he became one of the most powerful administrators you ever heard of, he was always referred to as this guy that tore it up in basketball.
Yeah, the hooper. Yeah.
So while I was in college, I had a child, and my child was 3 months premature. He's 2 pounds, 8 ounces. Wow. And so I had to grow up real quick. I was 21, and he had to sit. We lived in a Ronald McDonald house in Denver, and I took a hardship red shirt from playing ball. And I realized, you talk about helplessness, the power of our children, and the fact that they're a pure miracle to come out the way they often come out. And that's really good and strong and healthy. But I think pulling out of that, I came back and played ball after that, and he wasn't supposed to make it, and he made it. We lived down there for 4.5 months, and he put on weight, he grew, he made it. But, being that young with his mom and I, and we got married and tried to make that work, but I'm playing ball, and, we're playing in Hawaii Hilo.
Wow.
And the coach is saying, this is the most important thing in the world. And you're like, no, it's not.
Yeah, there's other stuff out there.
This is a game, you know.
Yeah.
This is. So I knew that I shifted. I knew that I was done in the sport. But what happened is I stepped out after that to raise my child, and his mother went her own route. So I think what we do is, athlete is not your identity. Make sure you have other rooted connections to your values. And to me, that became my culture, my Blackfeet culture.
Right.
And then they started to tell me, like my elders started to talk about, who are you? It's your root. It's your values. It's your connection. It's your stories of where you come from. So I think that's the other discussion, that we have to have with our youth. And for me, I understood that I was Blackfeet, that I was Amskapi Bakani, and then I got my Blackfeet name, and that was explained even more. I was Sikmi Otas, Black Horse, and it was explained why I got that name, because it's tied to my grandfather. So you start to see these things as your roots, and I think then they say, we never know what we're going to do in life. We just try our best to become the best human we possibly can. And so like that simplicity, because money, all these things, they come and go. Who are you when all that's peeled away? That's where I really started to focus.
We'll be back to my conversation with Donnie Wetzel Jr. after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com. Hey folks, coming up on October 4th, we're excited to bring you another live event, this time in collaboration with Climate Smart Missoula. Not the dark ages, climate science continues despite the attacks, is a conversation with Amy Martin, creator of the Peabody Award-winning Threshold podcast, and Christopher Preston, award-winning author of several great books, including his most recent, Tenacious Beasts. Join us at 5 p.m. on October 4th at the Confluence Center in Missoula. For more information, visit missoulaclimate.org.
Hi, this is Sheila Stearns, Commissioner Emerita of the Montana University System and former president of the University of Montana. You are listening to one of my favorite podcasts, A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Donnie Wetzel Jr. about his vision to build positive energy and resilience among tribal youth. You mentioned culture a few moments ago. Talk more about that. What is warrior culture, and what are the positive virtues of it?
It's a way of life. It's the discipline. It's the, for men, like we were having a conversation with some young men, and they were Native, and there's young women on this call. I used to have Zoom calls with some of our knowledge keepers and youth. And those young kids are like, yeah, we're the warriors. We're da-da-da-da-da. And then elders said, what does it mean to be a warrior? Do you know what you're supposed to do as a warrior? Well, go out and win our games. Go out and do that. And in there. And he's like, no. Your one goal is to protect your women and children. That's it. Then provide for them. Protect and provide. That's it. And they're just sitting there. But it's like, so you dig deeper into that. It's a way of life. And it ties to sports completely in my head. Mm-hmm. That's like in our film. I think like with sports, it's a direct line to the warrior mentalities we've had for thousands of years. And this is all walks of life. It doesn't matter where you're from. But you got to be disciplined. You got to be able to focus. You got to, but carrying on in life, you're taking care of your family. You're providing. You're out there doing what you need to do. You're getting up and getting things done when you need it, And so there's so much more to that warrior mentality. And so we're tying that in. Like I was saying, we can start with basketball and sports because that's the easiest place to start in our world. And then say, now that can lead you here. Now that's tied to who your great-great-grandfather was, who was a chief that did this in this battle, or who got the buffalo for the people, whatever. But it's like, it's a mentality of how you live.
So that notion of protect and provide and mapping that on to masculinity, we're coming through a moment in culture where masculinity has sort of been, there's a lot of efforts to sort of tear it down, if you will, or versions of it.
Yeah.
How do you think about masculinity and how it can be viewed as virtue?
I know that I have learned through some of the Blackfeet ways of life that our women are the most powerful. And there's maybe outsiders that will say, oh, the women never speak. The women are always, the man, they're behind the man. So there's all these things that come up. But in our way, and if you're interested, because our tribes had colonization, they can choose to go this way or not. I can never judge anybody for nothing. That's the other thing I learned. That's their path. I hope it goes well. And so those who want to come into this world, what I have learned is that woman is the top of the tops, closest to creator, so like you take care of them like that. And our women do speak in our ear, us men, because, even within our culture, they'll say us men are just kind of a bunch of idiots walking around. And they talk in our ear to keep us online. But the reason that they talk in our ear is because they carry such power with their voice. And like in our understandings, the woman is kind of represented by the moon, and the man is the sun. And you look at how the moon creates movement in earth, tides, whatever.
Right.
The moon has great power. And that's kind of how our women are. They could cause tides to crash or calm down, and so there's all these teachings that you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. But the big thing is we have to respect our women more than anything. And yeah, there is different ways in life that people follow, but that's our way.
Sure.
And if you don't want to go that way, well, that's cool.
Are there on-ramps to this conception of warrior culture that exist outside of sport? Could it be art? Could it be theater? Could it be some other creative pursuit?
Yeah, it's passions.
Yeah.
It's fires inside of us. I think it connects to all of it. It's some things that, again, I was in education I was in there about 15 years. And I studied the system, and I study just kind of, are you becoming a cog in the wheel? I'm into that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'd be like, we're just trying to make clones to keep this system moving, or what are we doing? And then we kind of eliminate art and shop and, drama and all these other things. But I believe that warrior spirit is the passion that we hold, the fire that we hold inside of us. And it could be whatever you want. That could be, raising your children. It could be, cars, building a car, or whatever. So it's all there.
It seems like in this conception of warrior culture and the virtues that you're trying to cultivate, there is a resistance to assimilation in a way. How does that impetus, to the extent you agree with it, reconcile with kind of a capitalist economy, and that's how people get ahead, and the modern conception of the way our country runs as it does right now?
I went through a lot of different interesting little experiences in my life, but one of the most interesting was a guy that contacted me, and he was working out of Yale, and he wanted to study intergenerational poverty of tribes. And I told him that we didn't know we were poor until we were told we were poor.
Sure, yeah.
We had everything. And so he had his perceptions, which is nobody's fault. And that's the narrative often tied to our tribes. But it's interesting you bring that up, because sometimes I wonder, why did I go through that experience with that guy? But he helped me to design a philosophy that I've worked called the modern warrior mindset. And it's 4 fundamentals of it. And so like what he was kind of going into is, what he helped me process the anger in my mind around this, that wealth is a perception. What is people's perceptions of wealth? You know, when you die, do you want your car, your bank account sitting around you? Or do you want family, loved ones sitting around you, your culture sitting around you? So I believe most want their family, but we get stuck in this world that, well, you know, my identity is all the stuff I own and the car I drive. Again, another disconnect from why would we like to have our family, our culture, sweetgrass next to my bed, and they don't. So it's a disconnection that, I mean, we could get deep into this because assimilation, you know, my great uncle Earl Barlow, who was he was the father of Indian education in 1972 Constitution. He was the one who pushed the language for our tribes. But he sent me this research study he did in the late 60s, early 70s, because they didn't have anything on Native stuff. And he was basically saying that you will not be assimilated if you're connected to your Indigenous native lands. And it's interesting if you think about that, because 2 weeks ago, I was sitting with this couple from Ireland at the Capitol.
Up in Helena.
In Helena.
Yeah.
And the guy's name was Shamish. And I was talking to him and I said, because he was intrigued about the tribes. Of course he was. And I was intrigued, why didn't they have tribes there? And I was like, we should have brought some people here, you know? And he was like, oh man, and he was telling me all this. And I said, you know that we'll never be assimilated. We will take certain things about it, but we're still on our land we've been on for thousands of years. And with that comes our language, our culture, our dances, our songs, all of that comes from the land. And to assimilate someone, you got to uproot them from that and move them to another land. And they tried that with relocation. They tried that with Trail of Tears. But I said, that's why the Irish have never been beaten, because you guys are still on their land. But they uproot you and put you in America, you'll take on this culture pretty easily. And that guy got up and he shook my hand, and his eyes were wide. He said, thank you. But that's what I think about that, assimilation. And I think in my uncle's study, we actually affect people more than they do us. You know, so when you're around more natives, you'll take on some of the actions, the voice, the whatever. And I think there's a strength that people don't understand that land brings to us. They just don't get it. It's like when you're gone and then you come back and you're like, oh, I'm home, you know? And I think that assimilation process is, I mean, there's prophecies that our ways will bring balance back to this world because we've kind of gotten too far out there. And money, on the other hand, money is the new, say, buffalo hide. It's just the way it is, you know? So like, a lot of our elders would talk about living in coexistence. We can still be us and take on other directions or philosophies if we want.
Stay tuned for part 2 of my conversation with Donnie Wetzel Jr. next week. Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Keely Larson is our producer. Libby Riddle is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music, and Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.